Hi, I'm Ron Noonan, product manager with SUSE, work with the public cloud team, and we're here to talk about the public cloud roadmap at SUSECon 2023.
And I'm Robert Schreiker, Distinguished Engineer focused on public cloud. And welcome to the SUSECon 2023 edition and the public cloud roadmap. So here's the agenda, what we're going to talk about today. First, we'll give an introduction to the various cloud service provider offerings. We'll talk about image types, application offerings, and how to find what we're publishing. Then we're going to take a closer look about the upcoming products, updates, and what brand new things we have in SCORE, and give a more detailed overview about how the new product offerings will work.
Great.
Ron, if you want to get us started about the image types.
Sure. Thanks, Robert. So what we have going here is two real class of image types that are up there today. And we're going to start with what's there today and where you can find them. The image types that you can find on the marketplaces today or on the cloud providers are on-demand or pay-as-you-go images. These are images that you can use that monetize through the marketplaces and through the CSPs. And they're really useful for when you want to start and stop systems when you have basically on-demand captures it well. When you have the reason to use the image for a while, stop it. It's good for concepts, temporary needs. It's bursty workloads. It's very useful for bursting into the cloud when you have applications that are running and then you run out of your capacity and you want to flow into the cloud. Helps with those environments a lot. And really, if you have workloads that, as it says there, were defined for off hours or non-use. There are other type of image that's up there that you can find listed are these bring your own subscription images. And these are images that are built and run and have the same facilities as the on-demand images, but they are designed so that you can acquire your license external to the CSP. Say you bought one directly from SUSE or you bought one from a reseller, you could bring that subscription and apply it to these instances. And then they would run, and when you apply that subscription, you'd have a fully running operating system in the cloud, but the monetization would be from the subscription you had that you brought to the cloud, not the one through the cloud. And these instances are contract-based instead of on-demand. And when they're contract-based, they're really useful for long-running workloads. They have the ability to allow you to run them from on-prem and then migrate them to the cloud while they're still in the same contract. They're helpful for steady use cases. And they also allow you to do add-on features. If you have things that you've added into the operating system, the bring your own subscription in the contract approach allows you to maintain and keep those components that were added into the environment, as opposed to the on-demand systems that come as they stand. Robert, did you want to add anything to
Yeah,
that?
and let me give you some examples, especially about the add-ons. For example, if you have workloads where you don't want to reboot your machines after every kernel updates. So one of those add-ons that SUSE offers is so-called kernel life patching. And that is an add-on you can easily add on to your bring your own subscription instances when you have a subscription directly for SUSE, and then you can install those packages. They patch the kernel while it is running, and then you don't have to reboot if there is a critical security update, for example. The other difference between these two models is the support model. So if you're using an on-demand instance or image to create your instance, then the first line support comes from the cloud provider, meaning from Amazon, Google, or Microsoft. If you use bring your own subscription model and you have a connection directly to SUSE, then you get this first level, second level, and third level support from SUSE, while in the on-demand model, SUSE will support the cloud provider in the background, level 3, but you will work with the cloud provider to get your um, any support cases resolved. So hopefully this gives you a good overview about some of the differences between on-demand and pay-as-you-go, and these options are there so you can tailor your environment to your needs. Okay, and so let's go take a look at the current images. So SLES 15 SP5 is just out and is in the process. So this is not on here yet because we're not quite sure about the release date. May shift a couple of days. So what we're providing is basically SUSE Linux Enterprise Server, SUSE Linux Enterprise Server for SAP, and then SUSE Linux Enterprise for HPC, SUSE Manager, Server and Proxy, and also SLE Micro. These are all available in all three primary cloud providers, so Microsoft Azure, Amazon AWS, and Google Cloud Platform, and also in various flavors, right? So we have the pay-as-you-go and the BYOS images that we just highlighted some of the differences. We also have images available for the ARM64 architecture, and various products have various incarnations and various flavors. One thing we probably want to highlight here, Ron, and you might want to talk about in a little bit more detail, are the hardened images for SLES and for SLES for SAP that are listed in both in all three cloud providers.
Yeah, so thanks, Robert. And just to reiterate the point that Robert started with, the SLES for 15 SP5 images are being published to all of the cloud providers right now. Though we're announcing it, it's happened, that product is released. When they show up in the cloud providers is an ongoing activity, and that process has already started. So they may be there by the time we go live with this at SUSECon, but right now they're in process. So that's a pretty exciting addition to this table. As far as the hardened images go, we have hardened images for SLES for SAP in all three cloud providers for bring your own subscription, and we have them on pay as you go as well in the providers. And what they are, except for AWS at this point. That's still being worked on, the process for that. So that's in process. The hardened images are really the exact same product as the SAP product that's up there. So the standard SAP product with the service pack approach is there. The version 15 SP4 has a version of what we're calling pre-hardened images. It's the set of STIG or rules to protect and lock down the systems that work with the cloud provider that's it's being targeted to, as well as the SAP applications. So essentially, it's the same product with a configuration applied to the image to harden it in a fashion that's consistent with the basically the STIG rules and the SCAP rules. Robert, do you want to talk to that a little bit? The SCAP rules?
Yeah, so the rules are upstream. So there's a GitHub project where distribution providers such as SUSE check in rules, and then the rules that apply for cloud images, these have been pre-applied to these hardened images. So if you prefer to, you know, do this work on your own, you don't have to use the hardened images that we provide. You can, take those as example and then apply rules as you see fit and as they meet your needs. One example, there is one rule that disables sudo access, for example, which we cannot apply out of the gate for the general images that we publish, because then you would not be able to administer the system. So that would be something that you would apply on your own after you have set up the users that meet that fit for the instance that you're setting up for your organization. So we can't apply all the rules, but we've taken a cross section of STIG and SIS rules that we think are a useful baseline to start for these hardened images, and that's what we published. So there are a lot of rules that are already applied, with the idea that it makes it easier for you to customize, and then you have fewer rules to apply if, again, the rules that we apply meet your needs.
Yeah, and so that's a great point. Robert just made a point, and implied in that is you could, in fact, take the standard image that's not pre-hardened and apply any rules you wanted from scratch and get to the same spot. It would just take you a while. We're creating a profile so that you don't have to do that, and essentially that's what this is. It's a convenience, and it's been a very asked for convenience that we're excited to bring to the market.
Yep. Okay, so next, let's talk about how you find these images. So one thing that we have here at SUSE is we have a tool called Pint, and you can see a web interface here at pint.suse.com. And this is how you really find the most accurate information about what is available in the cloud providers and in which state the images are in. And we'll talk about lifecycle states later on in the presentation. And then, here we'll talk about where do you find the image within each provider. So in Azure, there's the marketplace, and you can find all SUSE images in the marketplace. So that's pretty straightforward. In Google, most of our images are aggregated into the Google Marketplace. Google also has a quick launcher, so you can find our images there. And some images in Google are only available via direct access. That means you need to know the project name where the images are published, and you need to know the image name. And again, you'd find that out from pint.suse.com. There's also a command line tool for Pint, and we'll talk about that in the next slide. And then in Amazon, so in AWS, this lists for SAP images that are on demand, as well as all our BIOS images are found in the AWS Marketplace. SLES on-demand images are in the Quick Launcher and in the General Catalog, and some select BIOS images are listed in the Community Images, or also known as the General Catalog. Ron, you have anything to add?
Yeah, just the all images in BYOS. So there are a select few images that are under the community AMIs in the general catalog, and they're going to stay there. In general, all of the images that you would normally find for BYOS will be in the marketplace along with the sleds for SAP images that are pay as you go and on demand. Yeah, that's about it.
So, and a little more about Pine. So Ron will go into details here.
Yeah, I like the UI. This is a great tool and one that's really been very helpful to folk trying to find images across the cloud providers, especially when they're not all aggregated in one place like they are in Azure. So in this picture, this is a screenshot of part of the Pint UI. So pint.suse.com. When you walk into it, you can see on the top left, you can pick the CSP that you want to look at and what images are refine it, the filter to what CSP. You can then on the pick the region that you care to look at and see if they're available in specific regions. You can put a filter on there about the text string that the image name might have to help refine the images. And on also one of the callouts that's not there, you can in the state right now it says active. So second from the top left filter option is active. We're going to get into the states of the life cycle, as Robert said, in a few minutes, and that will come in and that'll have more meaning. But that really means you can refine the image search and the filter to say, I only care about images in this state of the life cycle. And when you do that, then it'll provide you a list with the name, result with the name of the image, the state of the image is called out in there. And it also has the publish date, which is very helpful. So this tells you what the date of that image is, and it's done by year, month, day. And you can see the rest of the information on it. Very useful component is the actual image ID that is used on the CSP. Robert, do you want to add anything and expand upon where else you can use this tool?
Yeah, and so the information that you see in Pint is there to help you launch a specific image or an instance from a specific image, right? So as Ron pointed out, in this case, we're showing Amazon as the example, and you can see the AMI ID. And so when you run, if you want to run this at the command line, then you can use that AMI ID directly to launch an instance from that AMI ID. And of course, you can also take this AMI ID and search inside of the Amazon console, and then you will also find it. And you can see in which region it is here. And this result is displayed differently per provider. So for example, in Google, you need to know the project where the image has been published and the name. So there's no ID. And that would also be displayed in Pint.
Yeah.
So again, pint.suse.com, find any image across the providers where SUSE publishes images. And then again, we'll talk about the lifecycle in just a minute. there is also a command line tool and a library. So you can write your own code against that library, and this is a GitHub project. So you can look in the SUSE Enceladus organization under Public Cloud Info Client. There are READMEs, and the code is published. And if you're running on any SUSE distribution, you can install a package running super in Python 3, SUSE Public Cloud Info, which delivers the CLI tool, which is called Pint, and the client library that you can then import into your own code. And if you import it, then you can always find the latest image by calling the API in an appropriate way. So that helps you incorporate the tools or the information from Pint into your automation, so that you can make sure that you always launch the latest images. And that helps us get into the life cycle. And there you can see we have 4 stages of the life cycle. Active images, these are actively maintained, and they have a 3-month rolling refresh cycle. And what that means, I'll talk about in a minute. And the current distributions, so at the time of recording, that's /15 SP4. When we're at SUSECon in Munich, and hopefully we can see you there, and you can enjoy this presentation live, then it is expected to be /15 SP5. So that would be the active distribution or current distribution, and those images will then be active. Then there are inactive images. Those get updated for critical security updates. These are basically distributions that are in LTSS or SPAS for SAP. Then deprecated images, and deprecated images basically indicates to you that that image is expected to be deleted in about 6 months from the deprecation date. And the deleted images are in the history. So in case you're using an image that has disappeared, you can look it up in Pint and then see which image succeeded the image that has been deleted. So there is a history in Pint from pretty much all the images that SUSE has ever published in any of the providers. Just a few more words about the 3-month rolling refresh cycle. So basically, every 3 months from when the image is released, there would be a refresh of that image. Unless there's a security update in between, then the image gets republished with a security update included, and then the 3-month clock starts again. So that's why we call it a 3-month rolling refresh. Ron, you have any additional things to add?
No, I think that's really good coverage. Maybe one point that we can tie back to Pint in the previous couple of slides, and that is these image states. You can look at the actual state of what part of the life cycle the image is in. That helps you find images. So you may be using images that you might say to yourself, why would I care about inactive images or deprecated images? If you have a bunch of servers running on a specific image type and you want to roll out a new one and you want to have the same baseline and use the same image start point, this is a way to help find that and use that same image up until the point where it goes away. So just a useful
Yep.
tidbit.
And so let's cover some of the state transitions, right? So what does that actually mean, and how do we get into these various states, right? So as mentioned, we're just about to release, or by the time we are in Munich, have released /15 SP5 or /15 SP5. So what does this mean is that the /pay-as-you-go images for 15 SP4 move from active to deprecated. That is because the overlap period of SUSE Linux Enterprise Server is 6 months, which matches our deprecation period. And so then after 6 months, the previous service pack is no longer actively supported. For /BYOS images, they move from active to inactive, because for BYOS images, you can easily get the LTSS add-on. And so therefore, we keep those images in a maintained state for security updates, and you can add LTSS, and then you have basically the same support in the cloud that you have in the data center. And then for SAP for on-demand and BYOS, they both move from active to inactive. Again, that's the previous service pack. And the reason for that is that for SAP has a longer life cycle than SLES. And the life cycle for for SAP is 4.5 years, which basically matches the BYOS overlap. So for active images, again, they get refreshed on a 3.5 on a 3-month rolling release or refresh cycle. They also get critical security updates. Again, so you can see here, critical security updates trigger refresh of images for active and inactive images. And the image that is being replaced automatically moves to the deprecated state immediately. Um, yeah, and then all images that get replaced, right, on a security update become deprecated, which means they're likely to be removed um, in about 6 months from the deprecation date. Ron, you have
Great.
any
No, great.
comments on
That
the?
was perfect. That was
Yeah,
great. I think that's enough.
great.
We've covered it.
So we'll move on and we'll take a look at the roadmap
Yeah.
of our images and the applications that are coming. Ron?
Yeah, so this is really fun stuff this year. So this year in the roadmap, we have a lot of the activities that you would normally see from us in the roadmap with the new image types, the new service packs, and the products that are being updated. But also this year, and I'm going to call it out right now with these little arrows up here. As of SUSECon right now, we're announcing that NeuVector, which is our security Kubernetes application that can be installed on a container cluster or a Kubernetes platform, that that will be available on Amazon as of SUSECon, or it's being in process published there right now. That will be an on-demand version that monetizes through the Amazon Marketplace. So you'll be able to go up to the Amazon Marketplace, search for NeuVector, find this application, and install it via Helm install into a cluster and or sets of clusters, and we'll talk about how that actually works into your environment, and it will do all of the things that NeuVector does to lock down your environment. And that's happening right now in this quarter. In addition to this quarter, as Robert said, that's also in process, probably live by the time we're standing in Munich, is SUSE Linux Enterprise Server 15. Service Pack SP5 will be there, and across Amazon, Azure, and Google, and pay as you go and BYOS forms. The SUSE Linux Enterprise server for SAP 15 SP5 will be there. Again, the same things. For HPC, it'll be there. And then SLE Micro is coming out with versions 5.3 and 5.4. And it's, again, likely that those are already published and available by the time we show up at Munich for the live event. In calendar 3, we have NeuVector rolling onto Azure. This is the same thing that we were rolling out the previous quarter on Amazon, but Azure will have a version of NeuVector as a pay-as-you-go offering that you'll be able to find in the Azure Marketplace, and as well as in Q3, you'll find it showing up on the Google Cloud Platform, so in their marketplace, and that'll be in the marketplace on Google Cloud Platform, not the console. So the addition there of the NeuVector will then be across all three cloud providers. And then SUSE Manager will show up on Amazon, which is another new product that will be a pay-as-you-go offering, and we'll describe how that works in a little bit. And then SLE Micro 5.4, which I'm going to just have to say, it'll be there on Azure in pay-as-you-go format, and it should already be in Amazon as we speak. Calendar 4, we have Rancher showing up on Amazon, Azure, and Google all at the same time, hopefully in September, but it's listed as October, and that's the date that we're going to put in the roadmap here, but we always hope that it can come a little quicker. And then SUSE Manager on Azure as a pay-as-you-go offering will show up in calendar 4, Q4 also. Next year, we have a bunch of things to do, additional updates and capabilities to those same components. So we'll have node aggregation and things that we'll be adding to these releases, but we're not going to talk about that today, but we will go in the next few slides and talk about what it really means when NeuVector and Rancher become offerings, as well as SUSE Manager become pay-as-you-go offerings that you can get through these CSPs. Robert, did you want to talk to this?
Yeah, I mean, I share the excitement that Ron has. This has been a lot of work, and we've been working on it for quite some time. And so I'm from an engineering perspective, I'm very happy to see this come to fruition and make it available to our customers.
Okay, so let's just talk a little about what the model is going to be. So we'll start with NeuVector. This is the on-demand model, the pay-as-you-go that will monetize to the marketplaces. The table on the bottom is how the pricing model works, and this is very similar to the data center pricing model that NeuVector has rolled out in recent months. And it's a tiered model that's really based on volume pricing. So 1 to 15 nodes, it's going to price at a certain level, and then all the way down until you get to over 1,000 nodes, so 6 different tiers for volume pricing. And the way this really works is in the cloud, we're going to publish this as a monthly consumption based model. So that means if you turn on NeuVector, you get it from the marketplace, you turn it on. If you turn it on, you're going to get a 1 month charge based on the average nodes used while the product is active. So the consumption is based on number of protected nodes from the primary cluster and all the downstream clusters that are managed by it. And it's going to do an average node count that is really the average of the nodes while the product is in use. And it will then use a volume discount pricing structure to calculate the pricing. And that this is a key difference because it's not really tiered pricing on Azure and in AWS. It's a volume pricing model. So what that means is if I did a model where I averaged out and I had 10 nodes on average, then my 10 nodes would be $112 per node, and that's what I would get charged. When you get into different counts, say I did the next month and I averaged 18 nodes per month, all 18 nodes will be charged at $105. So it will not be the first 15 at 112 and the next three at 105. It'll be all 18 at 105. So it really is a volume based pricing model that's going to be implemented. And it'll automate these pricing differences and calculate it for you and report it to the marketplace based on your usage in arrears. So it really is an on demand monthly system that counts the usage and reports to the systems, and then the billing comes to the CSP. Robert, did you want to add to that?
Nope, that
Okay,
I think that
great.
captures everything that we've been working on.
Oh, yeah, I should point out the previous slide that there is a 5 node minimum, and it is highlighted there. It's parenthetical at the end of one of the lines, and you see it there near the bottom. But if you have 1 to 4 nodes, it's going to report 5. So there's always a 5 node minimum that will be reported, and then after that, it just follows this model as we talked about. Thanks, Robert, for letting me go back.
Sure. Yeah, and so this is the deployment model, right? So um, you can have an EKS cluster or really a Kubernetes cluster running anywhere with your primary node running in EKS, and that primary node from NeuVector would be procured through the marketplace. And then all these downstream NeuVector monitors report to the primary NeuVector cluster, where the NeuVector primary monitoring application is running, and then that will report to the AWS Marketplace billing infrastructure. So this is what this looked like pictorially. They're all connected to the NeuVector primary setup, and then that's where the reporting infrastructure runs, and then that shows up in your monthly AWS bill, according to the volume discount that Ron just mentioned. And again, these do not necessarily all have to run in EKS. The downstream clusters or Kubernetes clusters that NeuVector has integrated itself can also be in another cloud, or they can be in your data center. As long as the networks are connected, then you fall into the volume discount model. Ron?
Yeah, I think that's if you go to the next slide, Robert. That second scenario is highlighted,
Yep.
and which is really as long as the primary, as Robert's pointing out, is running on the platform, the CSP that you are targeting, then wherever the downstream clusters are running, it'll aggregate those node counts and it'll monetize through that CSP that it's running.
Yep. So that's how this works for NeuVector. And one thing to consider here that's important, right? The NeuVector application integrates itself into your running cluster. So NeuVector itself doesn't have its own control plane. It runs within the cluster along the containers that run your applications. And NeuVector instruments the Kubernetes environment to do the security monitoring.
And I think it's a good point here is that we have this highlighted. It says EKS. This is an example on Amazon AWS. EKS is an example. NeuVector's primary could be running on RKE2 in AWS. It could be running on OpenShift in AWS. It can still protect those systems and then still count all the downstream clusters. No component has to be in any one spot, but it does have to be on AWS where it can report to the marketplace.
Yep. Initially, so that AWS is coming first, and then we'll have the same model in Azure and in Google later on this year. Exactly. Okay, so now about Rancher.
So Rancher, we have, again, a pricing model that's going to match exactly what's being rolled out in the data center. The data center are annual contracts. This has the same model as NeuVector that we just discussed. It's 1 to 15 and then all the way down to 6 tiers of volume pricing for up to over 1,000 nodes counted. This model is designed and used to be monthly based. Again, it uses the average node count of managed clusters, and we'll talk about that, and it has the same 5 node minimum. There is an aspect to the managed clusters, though, or the managed nodes being counted at the average. The control plane that Robert just called out about NeuVector, there is one for Rancher. So the Rancher server cluster is your control plane. The nodes in that particular control plane are not counted. So the only monetized nodes that will be reported are the actual clusters that are being managed and the nodes in those clusters. It'll do the same counting of averaging out, where the average is the number of nodes being managed while the application is active. So that's the way the node count will work. It'll report it that way, and it'll also report the same volume discount model on Amazon and Azure. Google will be an actual tiered model. The discount model, again, will be if it's, say, 10 nodes, $450 per node. That's the price you're going to get if you have 10 nodes. If you have 20 nodes, it's going to be $321 per node for all 20 nodes. And that's the way the model works. And that's the same way it works in the data center. That's mirrored here on a monthly model. So that's pretty simple and straightforward based on the NeuVector model. So if you're running both of them together, you have a model. They match in how they operate. Robert, did you want to talk to that or go into the the diagrams?
We'll show how that works in the diagram. And so you can see, again, EKS is an example here, right? And you have Rancher Manager Server. And I want to reiterate, so Rancher Manager Server runs in its own cluster, right? It has its own control plane. Generally, we recommend that you have a 3-node cluster running for Rancher Manager for the application, and those nodes are not counted in the reporting, right? So when you go and see this, then as part of the Rancher Manager server control plane, we have the node counting mechanism, and the downstream managed nodes are counted, and that is what is recorded to the marketplace. Now, unlike NeuVector, right, where we showed that all of this gets aggregated, when you run 2 manager server instances, the nodes that each manage do not get aggregated into one count, right? So there will be 2 counts. The Rancher Manager servers are independent of each other, while for NeuVector, you can tie everything together into one report. If you're running multiple manager server control planes, then they do not get tied into one report. You get 2 reports, one for each Rancher Manager server, right? One for each control plane.
Yeah, I note on that because that's a really valid technical point, but it's also one that we hope to solve in the future. But in the current iteration and what's going to be deployed, the counts are per control plane. And as Robert said, if that is not, if there's a scenario in your environment where you want to deploy this and you expect to have many control planes running for for any valid reasons. There's numbers of them like staging and dev and production. You can contact SUSE and we will work with you directly to create a specific implementation private offer that will run and monetize through the same format that allows you to take advantage of the node counts that you expect to run. So just a caveat, until we automate this, we will work with you and manage this with you.
Yep. And as with NeuVector, you can see again, not everything has to run in the same place. So as long as Rancher Manager Server, the control plane runs in AWS initially, and as mentioned in the roadmap, this is coming to Azure and Google eventually as well. As long as Rancher Manager Server control plane is running in the cloud as on demand, then you can connect any downstream cluster, any cloud in your data center, into that Rancher Manager server, and you can have it report through the AWS Marketplace billing or the Azure Marketplace billing or Google billing, depending on where you're running the control plane. So again, this is we're using EKS as an example here, simply because this is the first place where we will be able to publish the on-demand application. All right. So how does this work with the monthly node count? And maybe Ron, you want to go through the details here.
Sure, as we just talked about, but this is the detail written down. So that again, the average node counts are per month, and they're per in the Rancher instance, they're per control plane, and in the NeuVector, they're per primary. And in the primaries, any of the downstream clusters that are part of that primary get counted in that node count. So the node count is counted and recorded every hour that the application is running. That's a key point. So if I say ran for 2 hours and I had 10 nodes one time and 20 nodes the other time, at the end of the month, my fee is going to be for 15 nodes, because 2 hours divided by, or 10 plus 20 is 30, divided by 2 hours active. I'm going to have an average node count of 15, and that's the way it's going to be calculated, and that's the way it's going to be reported. This is an important point. If at the end of the month there's a situation where the reporting cannot happen because the marketplace is blocked or the application is inactive and cannot report, billing will occur when the application comes back online. So Rancher or NeuVector, when they come back online, will report the information from the previous month that was not able to be reported due to marketplace and or application issues. I think that pretty much covers it. Did you want to add anything to that, Robert?
Yeah, so important, think about this also from, some people may think, oh, I can turn this off and then I can save money. But yeah, what are you actually saving, when you're doing this? NeuVector is the application that monitors all your containers and the networking, right? So this is a security application that you don't really want to ever turn off, because you want to make sure that any suspicious activity, any outbound network connections is getting reported. And from a Rancher perspective, right, while it is a managing application, it's managing downstream Kubernetes clusters. You also want to keep that running, because ultimately, if one of your clusters goes down and then you have to start your management control plane first, right? Then you're losing money on that side when that cluster is down while your manager control plane is coming up. So while you can turn the applications off, we recommend that you keep them running, and then um, the billing and all of that is straightforward, because it's basically linear, right?
Yeah.
So
Great. Thanks.
all right, and now to SUSE
Sure.
Manager.
Yeah, so this is the same model. We didn't do the preface slide on how it builds, but SUSE Manager is going to be the deployment slide. Robert will walk through this in a second. But essentially what this is SUSE Manager is going to be offered in the marketplace as a pay-as-you-go option. You can start a SUSE Manager AMI, and then all of the systems that are registered to it, that it's managing, it will then monetize, unless they are already systems that are entitled to be managed. And we'll talk to that in just a second. So, Robert, you want to talk about how this works?
Yeah, so basically, SUSE Manager, the application, works for the most part as it does today. What we're adding and what we're working on is the counting of the managed nodes, right? And so you can bootstrap any system that SUSE Manager supports, SUSE Linux Enterprise Server, distributions from other distributors, and you can enroll pay-as-you-go instances. You can enroll systems that run in your data center, and SUSE Manager will report on the managed systems. And for systems that are BYOS, for which you have an entitlement, those systems are then subtracted from what we're reporting to the cloud provider for billing, right? So you can enroll all your systems and you no longer have to worry about compliance, right? Because SUSE Manager will do the counting for you and will automatically subtract the ones that are covered under your subscription from SUSE, and it will report the ones that are pay as you go, right? And so for systems that are managed as that are BYOS, SUSE Manager will report that to the SUSE Customer Center, so you can see the systems as they appear against your subscription, right? So let's say you have 100 SLES subscriptions and you enroll 50 SLES instances that are BYOS into SUSE Manager Pay As You Go. Then in SEC, you will see that you've used 50 of your 100 subscriptions through BYOS. And for SUSE Manager, it will still report that node as managed, right? So you can see that on your bill in the cloud provider. And for pay-as-you-go systems that are managed through SUSE Manager, again, they are managed. They are built as a counted node, as a system that is under management by SUSE Manager, but you will not see the pay-as-you-go system in SEC as counting against your entitlements, right? So SUSE Manager does the management of that for you with respect to compliance of the underlying system that is being managed. And again, it doesn't matter, right, where those systems run. Data center, another cloud provider, AWS, SUSE Manager is implemented to handle all of that. Ron, you have clarifications on that?
No, I think that's great. There's probably one more slide to touch on that talks about SLES for SAP and the entitlement.
Yep. All right. So again, SUSE Manager is, we're doing a monthly count. Ron, maybe you want to talk in some more detail about the peak node counting that we implement in
Yeah,
SUSE Manager.
yeah. So SUSE Manager is a little different than the way we just defined how NeuVector and Rancher are going to count. They count managed nodes on the average node count per month. In SUSE Manager, it's managing registered nodes and essentially registered systems. And it's going to count the total number of registered systems at any point. So the highest number of managed systems that are registered will be what are reported every month. So it's a peak node count of the managed systems, and that will be applied and passed to the marketplace. But as Robert points out, it will subtract out. For instance, in the cloud, SLES for SAP, if you acquired that as a pay-as-you-go on-demand offering, it has an entitlement for SUSE Manager already built into its price point, and you're entitled to use it. So SUSE Manager will back those systems out when you manage them and not report those. But for instance, say SUSE Linux Enterprise Server is being managed, or SUSE or SLE Micro is being managed, those systems will get counted, and then the peak number of managed systems that are not SLES for SAP on demand in this scenario will get reported to the marketplace, and that's how the billing will occur. So it's a little different, but it's got some intelligence built into it, and it's pretty cool. So that's pretty much what we wanted to talk about. At this point, we're here for questions.
We're here for questions in Munich. So
Yeah, that's right.
thank you very much for listening, and hopefully we'll see you in Munich for the live event of SUSECon 2023. Thank you very much.